Hello everyone, I'm Víctor Duro Merced, and today I'm going to be talking about the work that, together with my advisors and some colleagues, I've been developing last year in the framework of my thesis. So I want to acknowledge also the National Institute for Aerospace Technology, institution in which I work. So, well, I'm very lucky because we've been talking about turbulent flows in the last talks, and my thesis deals with that. So it deals with the complex problem of controlling turbulent flows, and in particular on how can we control a flow so that, for example, the heat transfer at a surface exposed to the flow fields can be improved, for example. And we can do that through a variety of methods, so data fusion, data-driven models, or reduced other modeling of flows. First year was mainly focused on literature review, research gap identification, and already starting some experiments. And now in the second year, we are already completing some of them and hopefully publishing some results. And next year, we will continue with that work. So in particular, we have focused on impinging jets, which are a particular type of turbulent flow in which you have a jet impacting on a wall, and on the heat transfer that the surface fields. And today I'm going to be talking most of the time on this particular type of jet, which are impinging jets, sweeping jets, sorry. So they are a type of jet in which, without any active part, you can obtain an spatially oscillating stream of air. So it is very interesting for many applications. So we have velocity fields there in this plane, and then the Nusselt number distribution that represents the heat transfer. So this is our experiment, and this is, for example, our experimental setup. So you can measure velocity fields with PIV and the Nusselt number distribution with IR thermography. Ideally, if you want to control a flow, you need to understand the physics behind. So you need to understand, for example, if we want to control the flow so that the heat transfer is improved, we need to understand the coupling mechanisms between both effects. And ideally, if you have time-resolved PIV and time-resolved heat transfer, you can measure them both in a synchronous manner and then compare the structures, etc. And while for impinging jets, this is the case, so there are a lot of research on that. For sweeping jets, there is still some gap there, and that's why we are going there. So, however, we do not have that particle image velocimeter equipment in time resolved. And then the first objective of this experiment was in line with the objectives of the thesis to reconstruct the velocity fields from the wall heat transfer measurements using the extended proper orthogonal decomposition we have talked about before. In this case, we use fields instead of fast speed probes. So we use databases of different temporal resolution, of different fidelities, and these are synchronous. So although one of them is non-time resolved, there are 22 snapshots, for example, of nu per each snapshot of velocity. So this is very understood here. We have many more snapshots of Nusselt than we have of velocity, but every 22 snapshots of nu, we have one snapshot of velocity. So in order to reconstruct the velocity fields, we first decompose them based on a POD. We then take the temporal matrices, so the matrices containing the temporal modes, and we correlate them using the synchronized samples. And then in the framework of the extended proper orthogonal decomposition, we can expand the temporal modes, so we get a new temporal matrix, and we can go back to the velocity field. So now the situation in the past was this one, and now we have that one. So we have one snapshot of velocity per each snapshot of nu. And before going into comparison, we can assess the reconstruction quality. So here I'm plotting on the left the complete velocity field, and here the fluctuating component. So on the left, you have on the left of each panel, you have the reconstruction, and on the right, you have the test samples. So when it stops, it means that they should coincide. They are the ones used for training. So we are able to accurately represent the structures and the areas responsible of cooling. And there are minor errors at the central axis region due to the limitations of the process. So the objectives of the experiment, when we started it, were more or less fulfilled. So we have enhanced the temporal resolution of the PIV. We have combined the databases of different fidelities. And therefore, we can ask whether or not we are able now to compare the physics of the problem. And the answer is yes, but no, because what happens at the near impact region? So we see that we are not able to completely see what is happening there, which is a region of highly unsteady flow. And the two limitations of our procedure which is based on a POD, we are not able to completely reconstruct that area. And why is that? Because the POD is very sensible to flows in which you have very strong symmetries, very strong invariances, and therefore, for example, you have dominance of modes that represent that symmetry. For example, in the sweeping jet, the first mode is this one. And then these modes obscure small structures or phenomena that is less energetic. And here you have some references on this topic. So the expanded objective then was to understand the heat transfer phenomena in the impact region. And we are going to do that by factoring out those symmetries and those invariances through a preprocessing step that we introduced before going into the pod process. So we aim to provide new insight into the coupling mechanisms at that particular area. So we do that through this iterative procedure. So for example, for the case of the Nusselt number, we find the centroid for each snapshot, and then we center the snapshots using that centroid. So we get the footprint of kind of an impinging jet. And the same happens for the velocity fields. In this case, we factor out the rotational symmetry. So we find the axis of symmetry, and then we translate and rotate them, so that at the end, after cropping all the snapshots so that they all share the same space for the POD, we get this new data set and this new data set. So they are smaller, but now we have removed those strong symmetries. So in the past, this was the situation before. So we had the data sets for IR, we have the data sets for velocity. We perform the POD, the correlation, we expand the modes, and then we were able to analyze. Now we introduce this new step. So we pre-process the data and we obtain new data sets. And then based on these new data sets, we do exactly the same, but on the new ones. So we move kind of in the moving reference frame. We perform the POD, then we expand the modes, then we rotate back the data sets. We introduce back those rotations, and finally we can analyze. So what we are doing at the end is focusing on this particular area of the flow, and we are getting away of the wake of the sweeping jet, for example. And what happens is that, for example, these are the new velocity modes for the horizontal and vertical component. And as you can see, we're able to find modes that were not seen before due to this removal and factorization of the symmetries. And the same happens for the Nusselt number distributions. So we see modes that in the past were obscured by the strong symmetries. So now what we have is the following after rotating back. So for rotating back, we again get the centroids. We use them as impact points. We find the angle of each snapshot, and then we rotate back. So in the past, we have this reconstruction. So as you can see, we are able to reconstruct the main features of the flow, the complete cycle. And then we have this new situation. So you see that, for example, for the complete flow, the situation is more or less the same. So we are getting similar results. But in the case of the fluctuating component, for this particular reduced order model that we have built using 3 modes, we are able to see, for example, injections and ejections. And this is our current work. So we are analyzing how these injection and ejections are correlated with the footprint and on the wall heat transfer. And hopefully, after analysis, we will be able to understand what is happening there and then going into a control model. And then the other work in which we are involved is very similar to the one that Luca talked about before. So we have a similar facility, a turbulent jet facility. And in our case, we are trying to improve the heat transfer on a wall. And in this case, we are acting on the flow, on the main flow, by injecting radially at the exit through mini jets that are controlled through 6 different valves. We are injecting air. And we are acting on the frequency of injection and on the duty cycle. So here you can see, for example, the footprint of all jets impinging, and then this is just one steady valve, and this is no actuation. So we have a framework using a hybrid genetic algorithm that was developed by Isaac Robledo and Rodrigo Castellanos that is soon to be published, in fact, very efficient. So we are trying to find an optimal solution while minimizing, for example, the power input. So we are working also on that, and we hope to be publishing by the end of the year. And then as for this scientific output of this year, so we are currently working on a paper that will be published soon, I hope. And there is other one planned for the end of the year. They are laughing over there. I don't know why. And then we have these conference contributions this year that we are publishing in different conferences on particle image velocimetry, on fluid visualization, and on fluid control. So that's all from my side. If you have any questions or any interest in this, I'm very glad to discuss. Thank you.